Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Dot Porter. I am a curator in the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books, and Manuscripts at the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. And we are here for Coffee with a Codex, which, if you've been here before, you've heard me say this. This is our weekly 30-minute show and tell of a manuscript from our collection. If you haven't been here before, welcome. I hope you have a good time. We always have, I think, a pretty good time here. So the manuscript that we are going to look at today is LJS 236, which you can see right here. LJS means that it's from the Schoenberg collection. This was a collection that was given to us by Lawrence Schoenberg and his wife, Barbara. Mr. Schoenberg, he had a real interest in secular manuscripts, particularly the history of science and philosophy and that kind of thing. And so this is a really great example of the kind of book that he liked. So this is a second half of the 15th century Italian manuscript that contains many copies of medical texts. And we'll get it. I have a whole list here. So we'll go through and we'll talk about all of the different texts that are contained here. Some of them are pretty well known. In fact, fully half, I'll show you this. So fully half of this book is taken up by one text in particular. And then there are several other ones that follow, some of them only, maybe a page or so long. And I have, in the years that I've been working with manuscripts, I've actually noticed that this is a thing that happens a lot, where you'll have a book that has sort of a big text that starts it, and then it's like filling in with other examples of usually related texts there. So we'll take a closer look inside in a minute. I want to look at the outside because the binding is pretty cool. So this is the original, I think. The record that we got when we bought the manuscript says that this is the original, or at least it's very early. So this is the 15th century binding, and it's parchment over wooden boards. So you can't, we can see the wood here. So there's the wood. You can see it, and you can actually see one of the things that's happened is that the binding is actually, it is completely off of that. I won't take it out, but you can see that this gives you a sort of a unique perspective in there. So I like to talk about how books are constructed and about how you have quires, and quires are made of sheets of parchment that are stacked and then folded and then sewn together. And what we see here is a really great example of this happening here. So these lines that we see here, these are the edges of the quires. And there are actually holes where thread has gone through and this has been, I guess, sewn together. Although this raises an interesting question, because if this is the original binding, why are there odd holes? Or maybe it was rebound. Maybe there was work done to it, and so there were new sewing holes put in. I don't actually know what the history of the binding of the book is. But anyway, here we go. So we've got parchment over there. And one more thing, so before I forget, when we get to the back, there's this fantastic flyleaf and paste down. The paste down is it's been pasted down here to sort of protect the inside of the front cover. And then the flyleaf is this part here. And this is, all right, I'm gonna set this down. This has been reused from an 11th century, I think it said, clearly very early leaf that was around and nobody was using it. And so it was used as part of the binding here. And actually a lot of, there are a lot of early manuscripts that only survive in this kind of situation where they were used later at some point because the book itself was maybe it was damaged or something, and so it got stuck in to this 15th century binding there. All right, so getting me unhappy. There we go. Also, they've got these neat bosses, metal bosses at the front. This would have been used, it sets you when you set the book down on a table, it sits on these metal bindings or metal bosses. It doesn't actually sit right on the parchment, which is another sort of way to make sure that your book is going to last a little bit longer. At one point, there would have been a strap. So we've got this clasp here. It's actually pretty. There's like a little flower design there. A really nice, this is actually a pretty nice binding there. So what do we have inside? So inside, as I said, we have a few different collections of medical texts, mostly medical recipes, in various hands. And so I think that the idea is that it was probably a compilation by students who had texts that they wanted, and so they copied them into this little book. It is small. The writing is small. You can see my finger here in comparison with the text. It's pretty small. We'll also notice as we go through, there are a lot of things written in the margins. So we have here the alphabet. This is, I think it's a little bit later, but not too much later. And it looks like it could be like a pen trial. That is, they were trying, they say, I have a new pen, I'm going to try it out. I'm going to write it out. I don't know that there's any reason why the alphabet would otherwise appear on the first page of this text, which is, by the way, Petrus Hispanus's preface, followed by the text by Arnaldus de Villanova, Thesaurus pauperum, which is the first text here. So we start out with the with this preface. There is no, if you look up here, there's a space for an initial, but there is no initial. There are no initials in this book, but there were spaces left for them, which is kind of, it's kind of interesting because it means that it's in a sense unfinished because there aren't those initials there, and yet it was used after. So the lack of initials did not, I think, keep people from using it. And you can also see here that there were what we call guide letters put in. So I'll zoom in. So the scribe did actually put the letter in as a guide to whoever was going to come in and add the larger initial. That work just wasn't done. Whether that would have been anything fancy or illuminated, I don't know. Oh, and this is why I picked this book, honestly, because I just love, and there's a few more examples of these little doodles kind of faces in the margins. And so we'll see another couple of these. Again, I think this was added a little bit later. Is this a child's hand? I don't actually know who got their hands on it and decided it would be fun to come in, but it's a neat example of signs of use. And I think we have another manuscript with similar kind of doodles that I think we're pretty sure were made by children. Here we have some additions down here and over here in the margins. Again, I think these are different hands here and here, maybe a little later than the original text. It is written on paper. Again, this is sort of the second half of the 15th, the second half of the 15th century. So roughly the same time as the rise of the printing press. And so we're seeing more paper, and this is paper here. Yeah, let's see. So I will keep going. Here we are. So here, if you can see, there are pages that have been cut out here, and there are other places where there have been, sometimes entire sheets have been pulled out. So bifolia have been pulled out, which actually, now that I'm thinking about it, indicates that the manuscript was at some point disbound, because how else are you going to get whole sheets pulled out of quires unless you disbind it? So again, that's interesting with the quire. So here we have the foliation up here in the right hand corner. It goes from 8 to 11. So actually these pages have been removed since the time that the book was foliated. Now I need to make it very clear, Amy Hutchins did not foliate this manuscript, right? This was foliated when we got it. So the leaves were removed at some point earlier, sometime before we received this manuscript. I'll keep going. You're going to keep seeing initials that aren't there. And then, look, I said there aren't any, but I think that is that a space where somebody has stuck in? It looks like somebody stuck it in. I think that's somebody coming through later and doing that, not that. And over here, somebody is making fixing an error. It looks like there's a word that was forgotten, and so they came through and added that. So, so this text was written by, who did I say? Arnaldus de Villanova. He was born in Aragon in 1240, and he died at sea off Genoa on September 6th of 1311. He was a physician, and he followed the tradition of the of the Greeks and Arabs. So Arabic and Greek, there's another letter S there, traditions in medicine, which were, of course, hugely influential through the classical period and the medieval period. And so that is presented in his work here. So there's a lot going on here. We have more notes down in the bottom margins here and here. And this, if you've been with us before, then I've explained this to you. This is a catchword, which is telling us that this is the end of a quire, and it's the first word of the next page. So hopefully that is actually the next word there. Yep, there it is. So we know that these quires are in order, at least here they are. Oop. All right. I'm trying to find out more about, here we go. So I'm just going to read from the description here. The Thesaurus pauperum contains a large number of remedies for diseases that affect the hair, against lethargy. We have more initials that have been added here. On mania, the stomach, epilepsy, the teeth, the tongue, tumors, a sanguine humor, the lungs, on coitus, on painful breasts, on difficulties in childbirth. So he's covering sort of absolutely everything. He's saying, I want to give you recipes and remedies for fixing sort of everything there. And I'm not sure how many other copies there are. Although there's one, it says here in the description, there's one in the Bibliothèque Nationale. So Ellen in the chat asks, what does foliated mean? And Amy has explained it too, but I'm going to explain it for the video. So the foliation is the idea of numbering each of the folios, or the physical leaves. So if you look up in the right-hand corner, as I go through, we're on folio 31, and then next is going to be folio 32, and so on. And when we talk about the sides, the front side is the recto, and then the back side is the verso. And so it's just an alternative way of numbering, and it's the numbering system that's usually used for manuscripts. We don't usually paginate. That would be writing numbers on each side, 1, 2, 3, 4, which is how we number modern books. It's this way, and we do it this way because it's been done this way for a long time. So in fact, sometimes if you look at Renaissance manuscripts, there will be numbers written on them sort of at the same time they were written or close to the time they were written. All right. There are,
Dot,
yes, ma'am.
we have a request for a close-up of the writing.
Oh, yes. Yes. Let's see if we can. I'll do it here since there's one of those missing letters. Let's see how close we can get. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's very small, but I will zoom in as best I can. I hope that's in focus for you. It is, I don't know. Is it like a god? I didn't look at the notes about the paleography, and I'm not a paleographer, but that's it. So it does have, it's mostly in Latin. The vast majority of this is in Latin, although there is some Italian. There is some Italian there.
I would say basically it's a Gothic cursive.
That's sort of what I was. I'm just not certain enough. I was going to say it's Gothic, but I'm not quite certain enough of my own. And then there are other hands that appear in the margins. This is also the same kind of script, but whether it's the same, sometimes it's hard to tell if it's the same hand or not, just because the pen and the ink can make it look so different sometimes. Let's see. There are some indications of the names of the people who were writing. So I think there's a note on that here on folio 60. There's this note down below. Ricevetti, Soranzo, De Brasa, and then it's again on the other page. So this could be the signatures of the people who were writing out the notes. So Eugene is asking what type of ink it is. I don't know. I mean, probably an iron gall ink, but it's not very strong if it is, because it's not eating into the paper as far as I can tell. But iron gall, or maybe is there a way to tell, Amy, when you're looking at it, what it's made of?
I don't know a lot about that. I would say that this is quite black, so it's held its darkness, so that might suggest that that we are up to the. I don't think iron gall necessarily eats into the paper. I think it sort of depends on
probably
the
how it's
person
prepared.
who made it.
Yeah.
But I don't know for sure. It could still be oak gall too.
Right. Yeah. So here I'm trying to get to the other, so we can have a look at some of the other texts. But I'm just stopping here because there's more of these notes, and I hope you can see it too. Like, thinking about the ink, the ink used in the marginal notes up here is quite brown in comparison with the black ink on the page. So they could be using a variety of different inks, just depending on what they had available. So now we move on to a different text, and actually you can even see that the layout of the page changes a little bit. So you've got, whereas over here you had sort of longer running paragraphs, these are sort of shorter. Look, it looks almost like little lists. So what is this? Medicina mirabilis et secreta quae valet includes diverse ailments on fevers, on the eyes, on the ears, on the lungs, the stomach, the spleen, etc. So again, these are going to be little lists of recipes. If you have a problem, you can look it up. Oh, and here, this little symbol at the front of each of these is RX, which is like a prescription. We still use that today. And so that's what it's saying. Here's a recipe for that. And this only goes on for, only 38 folios. Interesting. 38 folios of that. And then what comes next? So next, we're going to do something a little bit different because we're going to hit a section that's computational calendars. What does it say here? It says comprising computational calendar tables and a treatise on the passage of the moon through the various signs of the zodiac and the effect these passages have on different bodily organs. We've looked at several manuscripts here in the past in Copy with a Codex that talk about the belief that the movement of the sun and the moon and the stars and the zodiac had an important role to play when it comes to diagnosing illness. And so that's what this section is about. Whereas the first two sections were like, here are recipes, here are materials you can put together and take them as maybe a medicine to like make you feel better. This is a section where they're like, and you should also pay attention to where the moon is in regard to the zodiacs, because that can also make a difference. And this was a belief that was held, we're now in the late 15th century, and they're still talking about this. So this was a very long held belief. So we are now in a whole other section. The handwriting has changed. This appears to be a different hand, so we compare here to here. This is much sort of the words or the letters are sort of longer and taller. And interestingly, of course, you have one hand on the back side. There's not a blank space. It just starts right again. So this is either the same person writing in a different style, or it was passed on to someone else. This section, poems, penwork exercises. Here we have penwork exercises, notes, and things. So this is sort of a few pages of just a little happening. So maybe what happened. Oh, and there's our little face friends. I think actually what probably happened here is there were blank pages. That this ended, there were blank pages, and then the blank pages were filled in at some point. And then we're back here with this text with sort of more of the smaller writing. 173. This is a pharmacological treatise in 2 books. Begins imperfectly, which means that it sort of starts in the middle. Now, I don't mean in the middle. I mean, it starts and there's stuff before the start that's missing. So there's text missing. There are stubs down here. You can see where some leaves have been torn out or cut out. And so it could be that it was written in here and somebody cut it out for some reason that we don't know. So this is this pharmacological treatise in 2 books. And it goes on for a bit. Let's see. Actually, it goes on till 2:13. So let's skip ahead. Let's see if we have 4 minutes. Let's see if we can make it to the end But as I go through, you'll see again, we've got more notes in the margins. Let's see, 213. More, I think, Penn trials down here at the bottom. Let's see. Margin 213 verso is the end, and then another text is starting. So explicit means that this is the end, so that this text is ending, and then another text is beginning here at the bottom. There isn't really anything to note it except for that explicit, and then room for another missing initial here. So this is Ramon Llull, Doctor Illuminatus, which is actually a fantastic title. Ars Operativa, diverse cures for various ailments, including a final cure for an aggravated male member. Interesting. And so there's a lot more of this sort of recipes in here. But that's only a few pages. That only gets us to, if you see up here, somebody made a mistake with the numbering, which is something that happens, and it's been sort of, they realized it and fixed it. And because they did it in ink, not in pencil, as Amy always does it in pencil, they had to scratch it out. Let's see, 223 verso. And then we have miscellaneous collection of medical recipes, which I think means that they're not identified. I think there's a fair amount in this. So clearly there are known texts by known authors in here, but there are also these sorts of smaller bits of text where we don't know who wrote them. Maybe the students wrote them, which probably means they haven't been very much studied. That's something that happens quite a bit, although this one I know this manuscript has been written about, but whether these texts in particular have been edited, I don't know. So if you're looking for some medical text to edit, you might want to check out LJS 236 and have a closer look. It has been digitized. All of the digital images are online, so you can have a close look at that. Let's see. And then we have a garland of recipes ascribed to Andrea Portugalensis. So whoever that is, we have another bunch of recipes, and that ends here. And then we have more Arnaldus de Villanova. Another text by him. Then we have more medical recipes. Yeah, just a really nice, and this is very nice. I'm going to zoom in on this because this is nice writing. I think this is yet another hand, I think, or maybe it's just a little bit smaller. This is very nice. Nicely written. Let's see. More, Here's another section. What's that? 255. Miscellaneous. This is in the miscellaneous medical recipes section. There. I love this. It has had a lot of hands involved. Many hands. And this is, I heard about this. One more little drawing of how you put how you make the medicine, how you do that. So there we are. And it ends with more miscellaneous medical recipes here. And then we're at the end where we've got this earlier manuscript page to say goodbye. So it is past time. So I'm going to close this one up, but there's a lot happening in there. A lot of interesting Italian medicine in the 15th century. All right. Thanks, everybody. Hope to see you next week.